Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat?
Right now, we're going to talk New Orleans Saints because it's been a busy day for the black and gold. Even though they haven't brought anybody in, there's been a lot of exits to talk about. And for that, we welcome our guy, Ross Jackson, Locked On Saints on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. Ross, appreciate the time as always, my man. How are you?
Hey, dude, of course. No problem at all. Thanks for having me on, man. Doing great. Glad to be here with you.
Absolutely. So I think everybody's waiting for the Saints to make a move, but they like to let the market settle and stand back, so it's not all surprising. We'll get to that. I do want to start with everyone who's kind of went out the door, though, and let's just start with today. Jameis Winston early this morning. That was the one that really made the headlines. First, just your overall reaction to Jameis signing the deal with Cleveland and what is, a lateral move in a sense. He's going from being a backup in New Orleans to being a backup in Cleveland.
Yeah, I think that the big thing you're looking at here is the surprise of actually going to Cleveland, of all places. Not to take any shots at Cleveland. Sorry.
Hey, those are welcome here.
But they're not listening. They won't know, the Cleveland people. But the thing that I look at here is that the thing that's more surprising is the fact that he kind of took the lateral move, right? Like he told Kyle Mosley over at Saints News Network, my wonderful colleague, that he was looking for being able to go somewhere to find a starting job and maybe look to compete somewhere. He's not going to find that in Cleveland, not immediately though. And so this is my caveat here. The thing that I do think is wise of Jameis is that he picked a spot where, even though he might not immediately contend for a starting job, he might get an opportunity in Cleveland. I mean, let's be real. Deshaun Watson has not been good, and he's also not been healthy consistently enough, at least not healthy enough to stay on the field. And so with all of that, there's a real opportunity for, Jameis Winston to potentially end up starting some games in 2023. 2024. He would not have gotten that opportunity here in New Orleans. The departure itself, not very surprising, definitely something that we expected, but it was the landing spot that maybe was a little bit more surprising than anything else.
Ross, I feel like it's a fair question to ask. Was the writing on the wall for Jameis in New Orleans after the final game against the Falcons? Was there more bad blood maybe there in the front office about that and with Dennis Allen than they were willing to let on?
I don't really know. I think that the writing was on the wall for Jameis when he signed the contract, right? Like when he came back last year. Because remember, him coming back to New Orleans last year was a major surprise. No one expected him to be back in New Orleans for 2023 after they went out there and they signed Derek Carr. So if it was so surprising in 2023, it certainly wouldn't have made sense to go back in 2024 if there was another opportunity that he felt could potentially get him out on the field. So could the last snap against the Atlanta Falcons have had some type of impact? Sure, potentially. It would be ridiculous to assume not. That there was a 0% chance that ends up having an impact. But it always felt like this was not going to be a surprise, even from the very beginning. Once he returned in 2023, it felt like it was going to be the last year, kind of like the way we talked about Michael Thomas as well.
So the next obvious question is, where do they go from here at backup quarterback? They have Jake Haener, but he's only played in the preseason. That doesn't feel like a very solid option there for them. Is it draft? Is it free agency?
Yeah, I think you want a veteran. I think you want a veteran backup, and then maybe next year Jake Haener becomes maybe the full-time backup. And I think the thing is that people kind of get a little bit clouded around what 90% of a backup quarterback's job is, which sometimes is helping practice, right? Helping out in practice and making sure that the guys second 3 levels down are getting their reps and that are, running the playbook correctly, all these other things. But the other piece is that this is going to be a brand new offense coming in, which Jake Haener does not have any experience in, not directly, although some things will be very familiar. And he still hasn't seen the NFL game a ton. So I do think that getting a veteran quarterback that maybe has some familiarity with that Shanahan system that they're bringing here to New Orleans could make sense, just to have a guy there that kind of helps to bridge the gap, maybe translate some of the communication a little bit for Derek Carr, but then also is going to be the guy on the sideline looking at the photos from the defense between possessions, helping Derek Carr make the adjustments. I don't think Jake Haener's seen enough NFL football for that yet. I could be proven wrong, of course, but I do think that it makes a lot of sense to go for a veteran, at least to start with training camp, and especially one that's got some experience in those wide zone offenses. So a guy like Brandon Allen could make a lot of sense. A guy like Ryan Tannehill could make a lot of sense. And even somebody like C.J. Beathard, who's not going to be a free agent right away, but the Jaguars just traded for Mac Jones. They're going to have a competition for their backup quarterback behind Trevor Lawrence. If Mac Jones wins that role, post-training camp, we could see C.J. Beathard become available, and that could be of interest to New Orleans.
Let's shift from quarterback a little bit and look at some of the other guys. Malcolm Roach today, and the word that everybody in any report, in any tweet, in any analysis used with Malcolm Roach leaving to go to Denver, which, I mean, yes, you played for the New Orleans Saints. You, too, can be a Denver Bronco. Was underrated. So how big of a loss is this for New Orleans?
Yeah, I think it's a big loss in the run game in particular over on the defensive side, which did not progress the way that the Saints wanted it to in 2023. And the loss of Malcolm Roach, who is graded as one of the highest graded run defenders across many different metrics, not just Pro Football Focus, but others. He was a guy that was graded very highly as a run defender and as a run stopper. Losing him, and the Saints did have an offer into him, as I understand. That's what I've heard. And so, I mean, that's a guy that they wanted to retain, and I think that's probably where you see maybe the biggest loss for them with not being able to retain a guy like Malcolm Roach is in the run game, which hasn't really taken the progress that they expected it to take going into 2023. So I think that trying to find that true run stopper in the middle that can help them out, that now becomes a pretty keen focus for the New Orleans Saints. Doesn't mean you have to spend a first-round pick on a defensive tackle. This could be a June addition or a kind of under-the-radar addition like the Saints had years ago with Malcolm Brown when they brought him in, and was kind of an unsung hero of a signing a bit. That year. They could still find that guy, but now I just think that maybe the pressure's on to go and get that guy a little bit more than it was had Malcolm Roach been able to stay in New Orleans.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like it created a huge need now, especially depth. I mean, you had a pretty good two deep that you probably felt comfortable with at defensive tackle. Now you don't. So it'll be interesting to see how they address that. The other spot on the defense that really sticks out to me now is safety as well. I mean, they let Marcus May go. Lonnie Johnson's now gone too. I assume, obviously, Jordan Howden probably gets first crack there, but how big of a need is safety now for the Saints?
Yeah, I think it's pretty big. I think that's a spot, like, you want to try to maintain as much of that secondary as possible, which kind of tips my hat to my feelings around all of the ongoing Marshon Lattimore rumors as well. But, I look at Jordan Howden as a guy that can step into that role. They love him. The thing about it is that Jordan Howden is somebody that they really like further away from the line of scrimmage. They like him as a deep safety, kind of the role that Tyrann Mathieu played last year. Tyrann Mathieu played about 66% of his snaps away from the line of scrimmage, playing deep in the middle of the field. And so that's either cover one or cover three, like playing as a coverage guy. They like Jordan Howden in that role. So I think that a guy like Jonathan Abram that they could potentially retain and bring back, that's a guy that I know that they want back here in New Orleans. He could be somebody that they go after. And then there's like a big safety market. And if you want to look at a potential splash that the Saints could make, look no further than Justin Simmons, who was released by the Denver Broncos, who has a ton of familiarity with Joe Woods, with Marcus Robertson. Marcus Robertson and Justin Simmons were chopping it up on the sideline during the HBC Legacy Bowl while we were there, all these other things. So, I don't think that the Saints are going to be going out for any record-breaking contracts or any big deals here. There's a way to make the numbers work. I wouldn't close the book on maybe a surprise signing like Justin Simmons, but even still, if they can get a guy like Jonathan Abram to stay in, they love the way that he played next to Tyrann Mathieu the last two games of the season.
All right, let's go there then. Let's go to moves that they can make. Enough about the guys who aren't here anymore. Moves that they can make. There was the report earlier from NFL Media about Chase Young getting a free agent visit. Are they real contenders there, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a guy that they might have even had some interest in at the trade deadline when he and Sweat were both available last year. And so with that, I could see very much them going after him. Keep in mind that one of the other guys that exited was Zach Bond, who went to the perfect landing spot for him in Philadelphia. And so now, they've seen the value of having that sort of pure speed rusher off the edge and what that can bring your defense. They've gotten to see that. Chase Young fits that mold. Now, look, he's not been the greatest run defender since his rookie year, even though he was outstanding in that area in his rookie year. We know how important that is to New Orleans. He's been accused of taking some plays off here and there. That's something that's not going to be tolerated here. But if he can get past those things and prove that those aren't really representative of who he is, he could be a pretty good fit as a rotational player with New Orleans. So I do think that they're a real contender there. What we're looking at in terms of contract, in terms of his market value, seems to be hovering around like a 1 year, $12-13 million, kind of like what the Vikings gave to Marcus Davenport last year. That's something that you can slap a couple of Warriors on, give a good signing bonus, do the New Orleans Saints thing, and they would be fine to be able to fit that under the salary cap, right? So I do think that they're keen and actual contenders there. I can't imagine that the other two visits are the Tennessee Titans and the Carolina Panthers. I don't know that you can say that either of those teams are going to be more competitive than New Orleans in 2024, no matter how low you are on New Orleans. So I could see the Saints being a good fit for Chase Young if they're able to get it done and if they can make the contract make sense.
I have two more for you, Ross. Ross Jackson's our guest, Locked On Saints podcast on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. You mentioned Marshon Lattimore and all the rumors. What do you think happens there? Are they going to trade him?
I don't think that that's the first goal. I think the first goal is to keep Marshon Lattimore, and that would make a lot of sense, right? Like, even if you trade him, it's not like you save yourself from dead money. You're just saving yourself from new dead money, which doesn't really help you right now. So if they did trade him, it would probably not be until after the draft, after June 1st, so they can defer some of those salary cap payments. But then they need to get it done before the week before the season began, because that's when his option bonus kicks in, which becomes immediately prorated. If that happens, the Saints would be fine. It becomes immediately prorated. So like we mentioned earlier, they'll do the New Orleans Saints thing that they do with their contract, and he'll be fine. But I think the biggest thing right now is that if there's a fence to mend that fence and try to keep one of your best defensive players in the building. If they trade, then it kind of signals a bit of a failure to get that done, and I don't think that anybody wants that. So I think that the first priority here would be to mend whatever it is that's leading to any of this conversation that led to the contract needing some of that flexibility. And if they can get that done, then I think you see Marshon Lattimore in the black and gold again in 2024, and then maybe we're having this conversation again next year. Who knows? But I wouldn't close the door on anything, but I think that the first priority would be to keep him.
Should we not read too much into like the Avant Maddox visit and things of that nature in that regard?
Yeah, I wouldn't read too much into, a 5'9" cornerback that has played 12 games in the last 2 years. I don't think that that's got any bearing on what the Saints are doing with Marshon Lattimore. If anything, the way that I look at the Avant Maddox visit is that the Saints had only one player when it came to depth at slot behind Alontae Taylor last year. It was Ugo Amadi. Ugo Amadi's not on the roster right now. He's exploring free agency. And so, a guy like Avant Maddox, who is a proven slot corner, could be good depth for you behind Alontae.
All right, last one for you, Ross. Your time very much appreciated. Andrews Pete, he seems to be a guy who is causing a little bit of confusion in a sense. I don't think anyone really knows where that's going to go. What are they going to do with Andrews Pete? Who, look, he filled in very well for you at left tackle this year when you really needed it.
Yeah, the big question is, how do you pay him, right?
Yeah.
Not how do you pay him as in where do you get the money from? They'll find the money. But I think the thing is, like, what do you pay him as? You pay him left tackle money because he played so well for you at left tackle for so many games and stayed healthy, only missed one game last year, all that? Or do you pay him as a left guard where we just watched the interior offensive line market skyrocket over the course of the last, 48 hours? It jumped $6 million from what was the highest paid contract from an annual per year value last year to what it is now. Landon Dickerson getting $21 million per year. So now you don't know, right? You're going to be better off paying mid-level left tackle money or mid-level or high-level left guard money. The two are kind of blending now. So I think that's the thing that makes it really, really challenging. And so I have no idea. I have no beat on what is going to happen with Andrews Pete, but it could be a very, very interesting one to see, and maybe a case study we end up talking about down the road.
It's just never a dull moment with the New Orleans Saints. Look, man, the expectation might not be high at the current moment. They might have a lot of holes, but they never lack for intrigue. That is one thing that is for certain. Ross, we appreciate the time as always, man. Thank you.
Oh, dude, always a pleasure. Take care, stay safe. Talk to you here soon. Appreciate you having me on.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.